Welcome back to News in Focus. Now, the Freedom Flotilla Coalition says the Israeli military attacked its convoy of boats and intercepted several vessels as they were sailing towards Gaza. The FFC said the military had attacked the Conscience, a boat carrying 93 journalists, doctors and activists, before it attacked and intercepted 3 smaller boats. Now, of course, this comes as we saw from last week, many of the vessels that were being intercepted. And of course, today we saw the South African delegation arriving back home with regards to their mission to Gaza, and of course, the arrest and them being held as hostages in those Israeli facilities. One of the legal organizations that have been assisting many of those that have been taken by the Israeli army is the Adalah Legal Center. And joining me now from Haifa is Advocate Hadeel Abu Salih, just to break us down what has been happening with some of the other boats that have been intercepted and the passengers who have been taken as hostage. Advocate, Assalamu alaikum. Shukran so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV.
Assalamu alaikum. Thanks for hosting me.
Now, it's an absolute pleasure. Advocate, of course, we saw earlier on today more of the vessels that were intercepted. What is the response now from Adalah in terms of assisting those that have been taken?
So basically, I'm actually now in Ashdod port waiting for the entry permission in order to meet with the activists that were intercepted today. We expect, as for previous experiences, that they will be brought to Ashdod port and hearings will be held in front of the immigration authority. Then they will be moved, as we were told, to Qtsiut prison. They will be held there until they are deported. And they might be deported, or we hope that they be deported in the next few days.
Yeah. Advocate, I want to touch on the deportation process because what we heard from the South African delegation that were there, that even though on paper it seemed to be smooth, there was a lot of resistance from the Israeli side of things. Is that something, of course, that Adalah itself experiences with a lot of the other passengers that are represented by your organization?
Yeah, of course. Last Thursday, we were here in front of Ashdod port at 7 after we learned that the flotilla was intercepted. Our access was denied for about 7 hours. And when we entered, we realized that they already started hearings in cases of more than 100 activists, although we were here all the time. And although the activists demanded that they meet their lawyers, but our access was denied. We gave the legal counseling to the remaining activists. The same case was also in front of the custodial court in Qtsiut prison. There, they also denied our access for several hours and held the hearings in front of the court anyway without our presence, which meant that a lot of the activists also didn't meet a lawyer at any stage, and that constitutes a violation to due process and to their rights. In addition, of course, to the treatment that we got from the authorities, in addition to denying access, they took our phones, they took our watches for no apparent reason. And although for the previous times they kept our phones and watches with us, so they didn't give us a reasonable reason for this behavior. But it seems that the Israeli authorities are taking every step that they can take in order to make this process and as humiliating as possible.
Yeah, I want to touch on that, Advocate, because I had spoken to Joe Bluen, who was part of the legal team leading up to the Global Sumid Flotilla departing. And she mentioned that every single aspect of international law has been violated by Israel in terms of the seizing of the vessels, number one, and of course the way that the passengers had been kidnapped by the Israeli army. Talk to us about that, because once again, since we have seen from the beginning of the genocide in Gaza, Israel has been violating international law. Some may say they've been violating international law since the Nakba in 1948. Talk to us about that, Advocate.
Of course. So basically, they were intercepted in international waters, and then they were brought into Israel territory. This means that their arrest and their kidnapping is illegal in itself. Because the legal framework that Israel deals with these activists is according to Israel law, and they claim that they tried to enter Israel illegally. But on the other hand, we and the activists claim that the blockade itself is illegal, and Israel has an obligation to let these humanitarian missions go into Gaza, considering the situation in Gaza right now. And this interception, whether it was in Gaza territory or in international waters, is illegal because we are talking about a situation that obligates Israel to open a humanitarian corridor. And as we've seen for this mission and for the previous missions, Israel has continued to violate international law on that level. But also we're talking about violations also in the aspect of the domestic law, because these activists have been held in really brutal conditions. They have been denied access to clean water. They have been given food in really small amounts. And they have been denied access to medications, although there were people who take medications regularly and suffer from chronic illnesses. But the Israeli prison authorities denied them access to medications anyway. So these also constitute violations according to the Israeli law as well. And we have seen the authorities ignore their obligations also on the international level and also on the domestic level.
Yeah, you speak about the treatment of many of the hostages within these prisoners, or in these prisons, I beg your pardon. Greta Thunberg, of course, had mentioned that. And it's quite clear when you listen to the way the Israeli Security Minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, has spoken, it kind of adds up, doesn't it?
Of course, it was obvious even before they intercepted the flotilla that this was the treatment that they are going to get, because he said that they will be treated as security prisoners, and the way they were treated is very close to the way that security prisoners are being treated in Israeli prisons since October 7th. And he has even violated their right to dignity. Since we have seen him taking a video of the activists while they were on the floor and calling them terrorists, and taking also Greta Thunberg specifically aside to take a picture with the Israeli flag without her consent. So his statements before they got here really went into action after the interception.
Yeah. Advocate, I'm sure this is probably the most challenging of all of the representations that Adalah has had to do, because, you know, previously it was one vessel that was going, but now we've seen a whole fleet of vessels that have made this trip to Gaza to try and break this illegal siege. It doesn't get easy, doesn't it, given that, of course, we don't know how many more vessels are out there trying to, of course, break this blockade. But talk to us about the difficulties that Adalah has to face, given that they are dealing with Israel, and the resistance that they give, and of course the difficulties in Israel trying to do its obligation in terms of international law, which I think everyone sees as being quite non-existent.
First of all, given the large numbers, we had to stay for 18 hours in the port in order to finish giving the consultation before the hearings in front of the immigration authority, but also on the level of making sure all the activists were okay, and also giving and passing that information to their families in light of the pattern that the authorities have been taking from denying our access, whether it was in visits in prison. We've only managed to visit 11 people in prison, although we requested to visit all the people that we haven't met, neither in the port nor in the custodial court. But we have seen the Israeli authorities ignoring our requests over and over, and this has made most of the families really worried about the well-being of their loved ones. But eventually, only six people remained in custody today, and we visited them today in order to make sure that everything was okay. And we hope that they also will be deported in the next few days.
Advocate Hadeel, absolute pleasure having you, and shukran so much. Ma salama.
Shukran.
That's Advocate Hadeel Abu Salih from Adalah Legal Center. After the break, are we going to be chatting or staying on the Global Sumid Violations? The South African activists are back. Of course, you saw the warm welcome they received at the OR Tambo International Airport. I'm going to be speaking to Jared Sachs, who was part of the earlier Global Sumid Flotilla with the South African delegation. Do stay tuned.